3.
Well, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, as it may well be for you in Abu Dhabi, and welcome to my Running Journey webinar, and a happy Global Running Day to you all. It's my great honour and privilege to be invited to host this webinar today. I'm John Brewer. I'm a Professor of Sports Science, and I'm talking to you from the University of the West of Scotland, where I'm the Deputy Vice-Chancellor, and I'm in Glasgow, so quite a long way north, and you might be interested to know that whilst it's not quite as hot as you will have it in Abu Dhabi, it's only dark for about 4 or 5 hours of each day at this time of the year, so plenty of time for running. As I was explaining to all the great people who will be joining us this morning to contribute to this webinar, I've been running for over 50 years, mostly competitively. Running has been a big part of my life, both from a recreational perspective, but also very fortunately from a scientific perspective. And I studied the science of running right from quite an early stage. I went to Loughborough University as a middle distance runner and decided to take up endurance running. And I ran my first marathon as a second year student there in 1982. And I made a complete mess of it. Absolutely terrible run. I got heat stroke. I became very ill. There are some people who say I'm still lucky to be here. But having had that terrible experience and not finished, I decided to study the science of running to find out why I had been as poor and as bad as I had been, and was very fortunate to get funding from the company that at that time was sponsoring the London Marathon. And they helped me to research into the impact of nutrition on endurance running and hydration as well. And so I was studying the science, carried on running, very fortunate to work for a company called GlaxoSmithKline, where we developed a lot of nutritional products that helped with hydration particularly, but also with refueling. Carried on running recreationally, ran marathons. I've run 20 London marathons. I've run numerous distances from 5k, 10k, half marathon and so on. And as I said, running is very much a part of my life. So really excited today about talking about marathon running, talking about how to start marathon running, how to make marathon running fun as much as anything and part of your life. And I know we've got some great people here today who will share their journey with you, and I hope really motivate you to take up running, potentially to take up marathon running, and to complete a marathon distance. And I've mentioned the London Marathon a couple of times. The London Marathon was founded by a gentleman called Chris Brasher, who himself was a very, very good runner in his day. And Chris Brasher, who I was fortunate to meet a couple of times, used to say that running a marathon is a bit like a normal person's attempt at climbing Everest. And if you can achieve the marathon distance, you have in a sense conquered Everest. And I think that's a really good point to bear in mind. It's not something that everybody can do, but with dedication, with hard work, it's something that is achievable for the vast majority of the population. And when you get there, when you cross that finishing line, having run your first marathon, or indeed the 20th marathon or the 100th marathon, it still gives you a fantastic buzz. Gives you a medal, it gives you all the big personal fulfillment that really helps make running have a transformational change on your life. So really excited about the conversations that we'll be having this morning, and thank you again for all of you for joining. So let me start by introducing Talib. I know Talib is familiar to many of you, particularly at ADNOC. I think you'll recognise his name. He's the founder of the Abu Dhabi running team and one of the captains of the Abu Dhabi running club. But rather than hear any more from me, Talib, why don't you come on to the webinar and tell us a little bit about your running journey and how you've managed to set up the Abu Dhabi running club. So Talib, over to you.
Thank you, John. Thank you for the introduction. For those who don't know me, my name is Talib Al-Salami, IT professional at ADNOC Onshore. I started my running journey in 2016 out of workload. Fast forward to 2018 when they first announced the first edition of ADNOC Marathon. I have ran 10K at that time. Then that bug caught on and I decided to do a full marathon the following year in 2019. After finishing the marathon in 2019, which was my first time doing 42K in one go, with a lot of struggle, questioned everything. I've questioned why I'm doing this. I've questioned existence. But the moment I passed the finish line, I immediately asked, where is the sign-up form for the next marathon? So I caught the bug right at the finish line. And then I realized after finishing that marathon that training sessions do stop a week prior to the marathon. So I decided that why can't we train for the next marathon starting in the good season, which is the winter season in here, which is January to March. That would give people a good sense of training in the better weather, and to leave excuses aside. That's when the idea of starting Abu Dhabi Running Team came about. We officially announced it in March of 2020, but then Corona hits. We had to suspend our activities until June of the same year. During that time, during lockdown, I have managed to pull off a virtual marathon, which I did at home in the backyard with 210 laps around the yard for 4 hours and X number of minutes. Toward the end of that year, I decided to do another virtual marathon, which is New York City Virtual Marathon, with the support of the team, to sort of get a sense of how the marathon works after Corona. And then successfully, I managed to do my second official marathon in 2021 with around 50 of my runners. That marked the year of 50 for UAE. We ran it with 50 runners who were doing the first marathon ever. 1/3 of that number have been doing their marathon for the first time, and it was a very exciting journey. Back to you, John.
So Talib, when's your next marathon? Have you got one that you've entered at the moment?
Yes, I do. New York Marathon, November 6th, Edinburgh Marathon, December 17th.
Okay, so November 6th, that's 5 months away, 5 or 6 months away.
Right.
How's your training going at the moment? What's your kind of training plan in the build up to November? So
this time around, learning from the experience of the previous marathon, I'm trying to focus more on not thinking too much of the speed or the finish time, rather than enjoying the 42 kilometers or 26 miles. And as we've mentioned before, in the team and our previous discussion, that doing it collectively sort of gives you that vibe that okay, there is a reason to push forward, there is a reason to cross that finish line, and to carry a message that we're active for life. There is no need for us to be competitive in that sense that we need to finish in 2 hours, and if we can finish sub 2 hours, that will be breaking the world record, obviously. But for us as recreational runners, the focus here is to break that barrier of fear and try to run regardless, whether you're doing 12.5 or 5K or 10K, marathon team relay or full marathon. Any of the distances in Edinburgh Marathon is applicable in this case.
Yeah, I agree, and I think the very important thing to remember when you're preparing for a marathon, and I often use this phrase, is that particularly if it's your first marathon, is that the challenge is to complete the distance, not to compete at it. And I think, as you've just rightly said, the challenge is the 42 kilometers, and the time, obviously great, and if you can do it in 2.5, 3 hours, fantastic. But even if it takes you 5 or 6 hours, it's still a massive achievement. And I've been fortunate over the years to run my own race, but also helped some celebrities complete the course. And some of my most satisfying marathons and the most fun marathons have been where I've been helping people at a speed that I find relatively comfortable. And I've got a slow time, but had a fantastic day. And I think, particularly if it's your first marathon, having a fantastic day, soaking up that marathon experience, I'm sure you'll probably agree, is the best part of it.
Going through that same exact experience in 2021, earlier 2022, earlier this year in January, we as a team have supported one of our runners who could not attend Edinburgh Marathon to do her first marathon distance. All as a team at a comfortable pace, and it goes exactly with what you said. It's not about conquering the time. It's about finishing the distance while having fun. Everybody is laughing, everybody's having a good time. And before we know it, we just finished 42 kilometers.
It also takes the pressure off you. And I've got a very good friend who's run a number of marathons, and he is usually quite competitive, but he tells a great story where he pulled a calf muscle about 10 kilometers into the marathon. Knew that he couldn't run properly, but he could carry on running. It wasn't so bad. And he actually had, again, one of his best ever marathons, because immediately the pressure of doing 5-minute kilometers, whatever it might be, that had gone. His main goal was to complete the distance, and when he did, absolutely fantastic. Tell me, you've got your running club, and well done for setting that up and for inspiring so many people to take up running. Do you find that having groups of people training together is motivational, that it's easier for people to train as a group, and are you still getting people joining the club looking to train for a marathon?
When I was running solo, I thought that was the best thing ever, and I will do that for the rest of my life. But I don't want to be committed to a group, no commitment, no strings attached. I'll do my own thing at my own time. And I thought that was the most brilliant idea, and it may be. But then when I joined the group, it gave me a different flavor of group activity, where there are days where I feel down and I don't want to go for a run, and then you find the reason to meet up and do it at a comfortable pace, or doing it as a fun conversational pace, and time passes by and it clears out your head. And now I see people, yesterday I've seen a total random person, and they're like, "Are you the captain of that running team?" I'm like, "Yeah, I am the captain of that running team." You got that right. I don't take credit for it. Every single member of the team, whomever joined in at any fitness level, contributed to the success of this group activity and this team as a whole unit. That's a holistic view of having a team binding together for a mutual goal, which is, again, for me, to stay active for life. I want to be a veteran and compete in a marathon at one point. So, and now I look up to you, and I'm trying to keep up with that momentum.
Thank you for that. As I say, I still love running, and I think one of the great things, as we were chatting about beforehand with running, is that as you get older, you move into different age categories, and so it does mean that if you want to be competitive, even if you're, dare I say, over 60, like I am, you can still race against other people of the same age and get that thrill. I have to say, even yesterday, I found myself on the national ranking tables looking to see where I was ranked for various distances in the UK, and it's great to see your name up there reasonably high up the list, which is quite fulfilling and quite good fun. Tali, before I hand over to Miriam, I've got one final sort of question or reflection for you. You've said you've got 2 marathons that are coming up. One is the New York Marathon in November, I think you said it was, and then the second one is the ADNOC Marathon in December. Clearly there is a big contrast between them. Although the distance is going to be 42 kilometers in each, you will be facing slightly different challenges, I would suggest, at each of them. How are you going to manage the heat and humidity of Abu Dhabi versus perhaps somewhat less heat and humidity in New York City?
I did run a half marathon last year around the same time in New York, and to just get a sensation of how is it going to be in a colder season, in a colder weather, relatively colder weather compared to November in Abu Dhabi. Totally different, totally, the pacing plan works differently, your breathing works differently. It's a fact that here there's heat and humidity. We cannot deny it. It's always there. It always has been there. So it's a factor, definitely. But I'm tackling it in a different way. So in New York, probably I'm going to be more on the competitive side. I want to finish on a certain finish time, target time. But in Abu Dhabi, definitely there will be more new runners doing the marathon this year, like Khalid and Dr. Muhammad, and I will definitely stick with them from the starting line to the finish line. Good,
excellent. And it's interesting to hear you say that you're seeing the cold of New York almost as much of a challenge as the heat of Abu Dhabi, if I'm hearing you correctly. Certainly for me, running in the heat of Abu Dhabi would be a huge challenge. And one of the things that sports science research has shown us is that the ideal running temperature for a marathon is about 11 or 12 degrees. That's warm enough to keep the muscles supple and to stop you getting, cramping and so on. But at the same time, it's not so hot that you overheat. And one of the big problems in the heat and humidity of Abu Dhabi is that your sweating response is not as good as it can be. The sweat drips off you rather than evaporates. That means that your core temperature goes up. For most of us on the webinar at the moment, and incredible to see that there are nearly 700 people on today's webinar, which is absolutely fabulous. You produce energy when you run. That energy creates heat, and that causes your body temperature to rise. And unless you can cool that body temperature down through sweating, control it by taking in fluids, then it can have serious impact on performance. So I'm pleased that you have acclimated or acclimatized, as we say, to the heat and humidity of Abu Dhabi. That's as much a part of marathon training for a marathon in the heat and humidity as getting the mileage in your legs and building up your cardiovascular system. So Talib, thanks for that. We may well come back to you later on, and please feel free to chip in and make any comments as we go through this morning's session. But Miriam, welcome to the webinar. Thank you for taking the time to join us. And I say thank you for taking the time because I know you're particularly busy. You're a mum and you've got children to look after. You've trained for a marathon, and I know COVID obviously brought huge challenges for all of us, particularly time challenges, managing work-life balance and so on. But you were able to train for a marathon during COVID, fit all that in to your lifestyle, and are still planning to run the ADNOC Marathon later on this year. So perhaps you could just tell us a little bit about your journey and how you've managed to fit running and marathon running into your very busy lifestyle.
Hi, John. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Well, actually, I believe if you manage to fit eating and sleep in your schedule, then definitely you will manage to fit also sports. So actually the marathon or the training for the marathon and other sports is the window of breath that I have to have during my day. Well, sometimes it doesn't have to be every day, but if I manage to do it, to train like 4 times a week, 5 times a week, that would be great actually. And let's say during the lockdown, I was practicing at home. I don't have a treadmill because I just don't enjoy training on the treadmill. So I was doing other kind of, workouts. So I was doing like B90X or Insanity Max 50, or sometimes I have emails from the Spartans runners where they put them some exercises. So I was doing it indoors mostly. And when we have a chance to go out, I would go and run. That time we were running solo, as Captain Talib just said. But then I got the chance to get introduced to this beautiful team of running. I saw actually the advertisement on Twitter, and I really felt that I need to join this nice team. But I was thinking it was June, and how can these people run in this weather? So I saw a video for one of the runners. She was like a lady around my age, and she was encouraging people and say, you guys just come and join us. Everyone can come, any age, and I said, okay, why not? So I joined the team. And the first time I was almost like huffing and puffing for dear life in that heat. And Captain Talib told me, so what is with the red face? I was really struggling running in that humidity. But the second and third starting to get easier, and I just got used to it. Running in the hot weather. So yeah, and now during this time, it's not just my kids are really trying to follow my path, and they're all athletes. So they do their own sports, but my daughter is joining me with the training sometimes. She managed also to run. I was running the full marathon for ADNOC, but she ran the 5. But she managed to come and run, and she celebrated as well. So yeah, that was nice. I'm trying to set a good example for them. And well, my daughter said I'm her role model. I'm grateful for that.
That's brilliant, really lovely to hear. A couple of things I'm going to pick up on. Firstly, you talked about Captain Talib commenting on your red face. Well, there's nothing wrong with the red face when you're running, because that red face is because the capillaries, the very thin blood vessels close to the surface of the skin, are getting bigger. They're dilating to take blood to the surface of the skin. And I mentioned earlier that sweating is one of the main ways that we try to lose heat from the body, because it's that evaporation of sweat that takes heat out of the body. But also by taking the blood closer to the surface, we can take the heat out of the blood and allow it to go out into the air. Of course, the problem that you have in Abu Dhabi is that very often the air and the humidity, or the air anyways, is hot, if not hotter than the temperature of the blood. So it does make that cooling down process that much harder. But that's why we go red. And as we get more and more used to the heat and humidity, so that need to divert blood to the surface of the skin is less required. But of course, one of the big problems is, from a scientific perspective, is that when blood is diverted to the skin to cool down, it's not available to go to the muscles in the legs, particularly where it's needed to produce energy. So that's why you find it very hard to run initially in the heat and humidity. One of the reasons why you do, because the blood that should be going from the heart to the muscles is actually instead going from the heart to the skin to keep you cool. So that's the science behind why you go red, and why you find it much harder to exercise initially when you start running in the heat and humidity. And that's why, and this is a message to everybody who's training for a marathon, that's why it is so important to start slowly, to build up gradually. And if you know, as you will be, as will occur in December in ADNOC Marathon, that you will be running a marathon in the heat, it is very important to get out of the garage or wherever your treadmill is and go out and experience the heat and humidity, however difficult it might be initially, because that's how you then condition your body to coping with that heat and humidity. But of course, the golden rule is to make sure you don't overdo it, and you have plenty of fluids both before, during and after your training, to make sure that you stay properly hydrated. So that's my first thing. The second thing that you mentioned was that you've become an inspiration to your family and to your daughter, and I think that's absolutely fantastic. I think having healthy families, not just having one healthy, fit person in a family, is so important. I think particularly as hopefully we emerge from COVID, having healthy lifestyles, building up a good immune system, keeping fit and healthy is going to put us all in much better shape for coping with life. And you know, I'm often asked by people, why do you need to run a marathon? And I said, well, you don't need to run a marathon, but what a marathon actually emphasizes is somebody who's got a healthy lifestyle. And even if you only run one marathon and then do shorter distances and stay fit and healthy and eat the right foods and do the right things, then that's a great way of living your life. So it's not just the 42 kilometers that a marathon represents, it also represents a healthy lifestyle for you, for us as parents, but also for those around us and our families. And I do think as well, when you are training for a marathon, it's really important to get your family to buy in to that training, because there will be disruption to family life. You will be going out early in the morning or late in the evening to avoid the heat. You will be coming back tired. You won't have the same amount of energy to perhaps do things with the family that you might otherwise want to do. And I think it's important that they are with you on that training journey, but also are able to celebrate with you when you have the achievement of crossing the finishing line. So Miriam, that's fantastic. And it was your first marathon that you completed in 2019. Tell us how you went about that first marathon. How was your pacing? How did it go for you?
Yeah, I wasn't very well prepared. I wasn't going for like a regular running training. I was doing some 10Ks here and there, but I was doing my other sports, which is like strength sports, endurance, but not much of running, like long distances. So when I went there, I was trying, just giving it a try, and I insisted on completing it. So when I reached like half of it, I was feeling like I'm losing my strength, and the legs are not the same. I mean, I have the will to continue, but my legs are feeling like 50 kg each, and I want to move, I cannot. But I was keep going. I reached 30, 31, and I felt like what they call I hit the wall, when I feel that I cannot go anymore. But I kept going, and I was pacing the time. I know that I missed the time, the 6 hours window, but I kept going, and I was asking myself. I was like, it was very hot, getting very, very hot, and they opened the street for the cars, and I was running on the pavement, walking actually, and I said to myself, "You are such a stubborn girl. You are such a stubborn." But I kept going. I finished it, but I didn't catch the allocated time, but I finished it. I'm grateful for that.
Can I chip in?
Sure.
Yeah, of course, fire away.
All right. So this is my line here. I had a talk with Mariam at one point when I first see her joining the training sessions, and we had this talk about marathons. You know, we runners usually try to ask about, oh, how did you do in the marathon? What was your time? And pacing and everything. And she looked at me and she's like, DNF. I'm like, what? DNF? And I was so heartbroken when I known that she got a DNF, which means in running terms, in it did not finish. So it's not really counted in the official record. So I went home next day and I took my medal and I wrote that little note that she's showing on the screen. I told her that this is your DNF medal, your did not fail medal. So taking that statement into the next marathon of 2021, she has actually surpassed her previous time by 1 hour. So
that's brilliant. Captain Taleb, thank you for that story. And Miriam and others, as I was saying to you all before we actually opened the webinar, my first marathon was also a DNF. It's probably the marathon that changed my life more than anything else, and it's probably the marathon that I learned, definitely the marathon that I learned the most from. And having now completed 20, there is nothing wrong with a DNF if you learn from it and you benefit from that unfortunate experience, really. But it's not in any way a problem or a criticism at all. Miriam, you've talked to us about your first marathon, which you've now completed, and you're hopefully going to complete many more. But we have two first-timers joining us here this morning, Dr. Mohammed and Khalid. Welcome to you both. Perhaps you could just share some of your thoughts on how you are preparing, what's concerning you about the ADNOC Marathon and your preparation for it, if there are any concerns, of course, and tell us how the training's going. So let's look at the top of my screen. We'll go for Dr. Mohammed first. So over to you.
Good morning, John. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. For me, as a first timer for the marathon, regarding the preparation, as a previous athlete in many sports, taking the 42 challenge, it's really would be the achievement for me. So for the kind of preparation, I already start to join the Abu Dhabi running team, and I start to divide the distance into a progressive way, and I start to fuel myself with proper food. I start to watch whatever I put in my mouth. So Khalid can also answer this question as well.
Yeah, Khalid, over to you. Thank you, Dr. Mohammed.
Thank you, John, for your words. For me, I'm never a sporty person. I have never been good in sports in my life. And first time I ran 1500 meters in a school, and I was not able to finish it. I didn't train for it, and it was a very horrible experience that time. Going forward, many years in COVID, when I got positive, and then it gave me a self-thought that I need to work on my health. I need to focus on my health, and so this made me think about it, and then I started running. I got a great motivation from the ADNOC marathon, I previously, in year 2019, I have seen a lot of advertisements and marketing from the ADNOC Marathon, and I was it really motivates me that how these guys were even able to finish 42 kilometers. And that time I was not able to finish even 1 kilometer of running. Then I gradually started on my own. I did a solo running. I was using an app with the guided training. And then when in the 2021, when the ADNOC announced the marathon, I immediately registered for it. And through ADNOC Marathon, I came to know about the Abu Dhabi running team. And I saw their post on Instagram and how they were training. And I was always thinking to, today I will go and join them. And then that day happened, and I went and joined them. I met Coach Yusuf and Captain Talib there, and they were really very supportive. And from there on, I started my running journey. And with the proper training, I was able to finish my first 10-kilometer running last year in 2021. And this year, I'm motivated to do a marathon. I'm already training for it with the team. They are providing guidelines, how to go about it, and following their training plans.
That's brilliant, Khalid. Dr. Mohammed, I'm going to ask you in a minute about what motivates you, what you're thinking about to motivate yourself when you're going out training, because clearly that motivation to keep on with your training, to keep running is something that's a real challenge for many marathon runners. But before I do that, I'm going to just tell you a very quick story, because Khalid, what you were saying was just reminding me of a person who I worked with quite a few years ago now, and it was a part of a campaign that one of the sponsors were doing for the London Marathon, where they were trying to get people fit for a marathon in 100 days. And this gentleman weighed, I think, about 120 kilos. He was a heavy smoker. He had high blood pressure. He had high cholesterol, and was very unfit and had never done any running in his life. And it was actually coincidental that January the 1st was 100 days before that year's London Marathon. And this gentleman got himself motivated. He started by walking before he actually began to run, because that was as much as he could do. He walked. He then mixed walking with jogging. The jogging then became more than the walking, and then he was jogging all the time, and then his speed increased a little bit, and then he was doing longer and longer distances and gradually building up. And in the end, he completed his first, and I suspect maybe his only, London Marathon in, I think it was about 5 hours and 40 minutes in total. That for him was one of the biggest achievements of his life. He lost, I think he lost about 20 or 30 kilos in weight over that time. His blood pressure came down, his cholesterol came down, and he had a fantastic day running the streets of London and completing the 42 kilometers. So I think your story, in some ways, not quite as dramatic as that, because you've kept yourself pretty healthy, but I think it does show that maintaining a healthy diet, maintaining a healthy lifestyle, and doing the right training can really transform your body from one that is pretty sedentary and pretty unfit into one that can complete a marathon. And I always say that we have to remember that our bodies, the human body, is designed to exercise. Now, it's maybe not necessarily designed to run a marathon, but many years ago, exercise was part of our lifestyle. We had to run to catch prey. We had to run to avoid being caught by a predator. We had to walk to collect food, to collect water. But of course, modern lifestyles with cars, televisions, remote control buttons, laptops, and everything else that we have taken the need to exercise from our lives. So I think what you're doing, which is to put exercise back into your life, but with a goal of completing your first marathon, is really highly commendable. And I know firsthand the sense of achievement that both of you, Dr. Mohammed and Khalid, will get when you complete your first marathon in December. It is an absolutely fantastic feeling, and one that you'll remember for the rest of your lives. Dr. Mohammed, I mentioned motivation. So what is going through your mind when you go and get your running shoes and put them on and think, oh, here we go, I've got to train again? And when you're out on that run, what's motivating you to keep going and keep pushing ahead with that training?
Yeah, following to what you said about the rhythm of life, that it's become so quick. The running offered me like a quality time for myself. When I start running, it's like I'm totally disconnecting from anything. I'm just thinking of or watching myself like I'm watching to any stranger, assess myself, just analyze anything that it came to my mind. And the longer distance that I cover, the more conversation with myself that I had. So it start with 3K, then it's going to 5K. Now, like in weekly base, I covered around 21K just for taking to that zone. And I advise all the audience to just to be in that zone, to join and to be in that zero destruction area.
Excellent,
and and for one of the another reason that keep motivate me, the medals in each race that I participate. In each race, there's like a positive vibes covering the whole race from the before the starting point until the end of the race. So for that, it's like an achievement for me. So whenever I try to cover a longer distance, I keep that in my mind that I'm participating in these kind of races for the achievement feeling. Back to you.
Sounds brilliant. And a couple of things I would just pick up on there. Firstly, one of the things that I find quite helpful when I'm training for a marathon is to actually envisage yourself or imagine yourself crossing the finishing line, or at least running the last 100 or 200 meters. That's a great motivation because you know that that's such a great feeling. And so I always imagine when I'm at training, I just let my mind sort of wander and think, this is what it's going to be like when I'm coming down that finishing straight. People are clapping me. I can see the finishing gantry in front of me, and I'm going to cross the line. And very importantly, from your perspective, I think collect your medal. So that's very important. The other thing I would add, with the ADNOC Marathon, which is still just over 6 months away, it is important not to be doing too much too soon. And I think building up gradually, and particularly building up the length of your longest run, is going to be really important. But in order to ensure that you don't burn out and that you reduce the risk of injury, you probably don't want to be doing really long distances until it gets slightly closer to the date of the marathon itself. So we just ensure that you build up slowly and steadily. Most people like to do a couple of runs of sort of in that 35 to 40 kilometer distance as their longest run, 2 to 3 weeks before the marathon itself, and that's a pretty good guideline to try and get to that sort of distance. But I think really importantly as well, for all of you, whether you're a first time or a regular marathon runner, the golden rule, and I'm sure you've all heard this before, is to pace yourself properly. And if in your training you've been running at, shall we say, for sake of argument, 5.5 minutes per kilometre, and you've been doing that for your longest runs, don't suddenly think that you can run at 5 minutes per kilometre in your marathon. And it's very easy, and we've all been there, those of us who've done marathons before, but it's very easy to get carried away with the excitement of the day itself, and there's crowds cheering you on, your adrenaline is flowing, and you feel really great, and you think today's going to be the day where I'm going to smash it and I'm going to go better than I've ever gone in training. And you start running 20-30 seconds a kilometre quicker in the marathon than you did in your training. And to start with, you'll probably feel great because of that motivation, and because in your training you've gone quite a long way, and the first 10, 15, 20 kilometres go past pretty steadily, and then all of a sudden at 25, 30 kilometres, whoosh, you really get fatigued, and that's because you've gone too fast too soon. And one of the problems with going too fast early on, it's a bit like having a car at the traffic lights and pressing the throttle and revving the engine. You're burning your fuel far more rapidly than you otherwise should do. So it's really important that in the early stages you set off slowly and steadily, and you try not to use up the body's fuel, but particularly the body's fuel of carbohydrate, or glycogen as it's called, where it's stored in the muscle, because we've only got a limited amount of that fuel. There's only a certain amount in the tank, just like a car. And if you are revving the engine up and you're using up that fuel and not using it efficiently, then you'll run out before the end of the journey, before the end of the race. And what's important is that you try and use the body's other source of fuel for as long as you can, and that's fat. And even the thinnest of us, and I wouldn't put myself in that category, have enough body fat stores to probably run 20, 30, 40 consecutive marathons. But the problem is the fat is quite inefficient, and we only burn fat when we're running at quite slow speeds. So it's important to use that slower running at the start of the race to burn fat, to save the carbohydrate stores that are the fuel in the tank, so that you can use them at a later stage when the going is getting tougher and you're getting towards the finishing line. So that's a really important kind of practical and scientific point. And it's the message is, look at the speed that you're doing in your training. Don't be ambitious and suddenly think you're going to run the marathon quicker than that. If anything, your first marathon is likely to be slightly slower than you've been running in your training. And set yourself a target time. Maybe 4 hours, it may be 5 hours, it may be 5.5 or even 6 hours. Set that target time, and then, really importantly, work out what that target time actually means in terms of a minute per kilometre pace, and try to stick to that right from the start of the race. That's probably the best single piece of advice I can give anybody who's running a marathon. It's both practical and scientifically based, and of course even more important in the energy sapping, fatigue, heat and humidity that you will find in Abu Dhabi. Now, some of you may have seen me looking down at my phone whilst the webinar has been going on, and that's not in any way because I'm sending text messages or whatever. It's because there's been lots of questions that have been coming in on the chat room, which have been WhatsApped to me, and we've got about 10 minutes or so before we have to draw the session to a close. Unfortunately, I have a very boring 3-hour meeting that I've got to go to that starts at 9:30 UK time, so I am going to have to wrap up fairly promptly because I need to go to another room for that. But I'm going to just quickly run down through these questions and I'll read them out. I'll do my very best to get the name pronunciation correct, but please forgive me if I get it wrong, and I'll give a very brief answer to each one. So the first question is from Asmat. How do you protect yourself with running injuries, especially knee injuries, coupled with age? And yeah, I can sympathise with age when you're a 45 to 50-year-old. Well, let me tell you, I wish I was a 45 to 50-year-old still. One of the best ways to do that is to make sure you've got good running shoes that have got plenty of support and plenty of cushioning, and also not do too much too soon, so build up gradually. And for most people, if you run sensibly on sensible surfaces, try to mix running on softer surfaces with hard surfaces and not do too much, then your knees should be fine. And I think you're probably all aware, I've written a book called Run Smart. I've also written a book called Running Science, where we do a bit of an analysis that shows that actually running, if you've got a good running style, puts less pressure on the knees than many other activities. Next question is from Sufia. Do you build up the stamina? How do you build up the stamina for running? What are good methods to get into running? And are there multiple breathing styles? So there's a few questions in there all at once. How do you build up stamina? Well, perhaps the example that I gave of the gentleman who was about 120 kilos is the best one for that. You start doing what is just about tolerable. If that's walking, that's fine, but you increase the length of what you're doing, and then you increase the intensity. So walking can become jogging. Jogging takes over from the walking, jogging becomes slightly faster running, and then you gradually increase the time and the distance that you are running for. And the golden rule, if you take the longest time or distance that you do per week, is to try not to increase that by more than about 10 to 15% per week. So if you're able to, shall we say, jog for 20 minutes on 1 week, that's your longest jog. The following week, the longest one should be 22, 23 minutes, and then maybe the next week 25, 26 minutes, and so on. If you suddenly go from 20 minutes to 30 minutes and then 50 minutes, you're likely to break down and get an injury. Breathing styles, to be perfectly honest, the best way of breathing is just to allow your body to do so naturally. There's been lots of studies to show that as long as you allow your body to self-regulate its breathing, it will exhale and get rid of carbon dioxide and breathe in and take in the oxygen that you need at the rate that suits you best. And often trying to control your breathing can cause more problems and more issues. Afrabathan Sultan Al-Maziouri has asked about what kind of food you need to eat before your marathon, and again, apologies for the name pronunciation there, Afra. I've already touched on food, which is carbohydrate. So it's things like rice, bread, pasta, potatoes. All those sorts of foods give you the carbohydrate that you need to fuel your running, but very importantly, have that 2 to 3 hours before your training and you're racing, but don't overfill, but also importantly have it as part of your recovery. And we know from scientific studies that the first 2 to 3 hours after a long run or long training session are when the body is most receptive to the fuel, to the carbohydrate being taken in. It converts that very quickly to the glycogen, which is the fuel in the tank, and that will help with your running. Kiran Kumar has asked the all-important question, what is the ideal speed to run your marathon? Well, I think I've already touched on that. It's the speed that reflects what you do in your training. It's a sensible speed, not an overly ambitious speed, and it's a speed that is as much as possible consistent throughout the duration of the marathon. The worst marathons any of us can ever run are marathons where you start off at a high speed and then you hit the wall, as the term is, where you run out of energy and the last 5 or 10 kilometers can go on for seemingly forever and ever. Yusuf Faltator has asked, how do you enjoy running mentally and not get bored? Yeah, I mean, that's a common question, and people do often find that staying mentally motivated is a challenge. I think we've had some great examples today of how people can motivate themselves. Why you're motivated? You're motivated because you are climbing Everest, sometimes for the first time. You're going to cross that finishing line and reap all the rewards and the successes that crossing the finishing line can bring. But also it's your time. When you're out running, there is no mobile phone going to go off with a WhatsApp message or a text. You're not going to be bothered by people asking you questions at work. The children, the family are taking care of themselves. It's your time. It's time away from all the pressures of life. And I think that for me is one of the biggest motivations of running. But also just bear in mind, as I say, it's that reward at the end of it. And I think just from a personal perspective, when you've completed your first marathon, bear in mind as well that it is much easier then to do your second, third or fourth marathon if you keep yourself at least at a higher level. The hardest marathon to do is the one where you're starting from baseline and having to build up to 42 kilometers. Once you've done 42 kilometers, it doesn't mean to say you suddenly need to run 42 kilometers 2 or 3 months later, but you can start doing 5Ks, 10Ks and half marathons. Keep yourself at a much higher level. So as and when you decide to do your second, third or fourth marathon, the slopes up to the top of Everest are not quite as steep as they were when you were starting from base camp. So I think that's an important point to remember. Everybody, I've only got 2 or 3 minutes to go before I have to move off to my meeting. I'm just going to quickly go around the floor and just ask each of our 4 excellent speakers for any final comments before we finish up. So Captain Talib, over to you first of all. Couple of paragraphs from you.
Well, you have probably covered what I was about to say, but to wrap it up, as you have eloquently said it, that running in general, whether it's a marathon or 5K or 10K or whatever it is, it takes commitment. You know, it just needs that first step to get out of your house, the comfort of your couch, putting on your running shoes, whichever brand it is, and just walk out that door. The moment you achieve that, then you are, to me, the way I see it, you're a winner, regardless of what distance you do and how you do it. The rest is just a learning experience. As you said, your first marathon was not something that you will be bragging about, but at the end of the day, it was a learning experience. It was a learning journey. You know what went wrong and you improved it throughout the years. My goal here and the goal of the team and all these participants is that we would love to continue doing this and be in your place one day and say, you know what, we're over 60 now and we're still running. No any injuries, no problems. We're raising awareness about this, and you know, it's a mental relief, to be honest. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Captain Sam. That's fantastic. And Miriam, just very briefly from you, final thoughts or comments?
Yeah, just 2 things. First one, I'm addicted to the feeling I get after every workout. It's undescribable. The second thing, people, if I can do it, you can do it. Thank you.
Miriam, absolutely superb. Thank you. Dr. Mohammed.
If I have a message to my colleague, don't overthink about participation. just join us in the end line. We want to see you there. That's it.
Brilliant. Thank you, Dr. Mohammed. And finally, Khalid, over to you.
My message is that I enjoy the running. Running is not just a sport, it's also a social activity where you meet with brilliant people such as we have it now. Let's keep it for our life. So I want to keep this hobby till the end of my life to, have a healthy lifestyle.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Khalid. Well, it just falls to me to thank all of our 4 fantastic participants for making this morning such a great session. I hope you've all enjoyed it as much as I have. Thank you also to Fatima and Lana for working hard behind the scenes to put the event together. I'm sure having over 700 attendees is a huge testimony to the success of this morning's session. I hope you've all felt motivated by what we've been talking about today. You feel motivated to pull your running shoes on and go out for a run and start training and exercise and hopefully perhaps running a marathon in the not too distant future. And I very much hope that I can see some, if not all of you, out in Abu Dhabi in the not too distant future. So thank you again. Great morning, great session. Thanks to everybody. Enjoy the rest of the day and happy Global Running Day. Thank you to all of you. Goodbye.